FBI start to keeping records. An estimated 1,600 individuals have disappeared without a trace in the expansive wilds and rugged mountains of North America. Among them, James Townsend stands as a testament, claiming an intimate understanding of what occurred, asserting that he narrowly escaped joining the ranks of the vanished. The account he relayed to his family post the harrowing incident remains chilling, to say the least. James referred to his encounter as the way to gay, aligning its description with narratives passed down by local Native American tribes. Way to gay, translated as the man-eating creature, differed starkly from the ancient Native American depictions. According to James, these entities have progressively heightened their intelligence over the past century, rendering them more perilous to humanity. They've mastered the art of evading human detection, a skill amplifying the frequency of disappearances, escalating at an alarming rate each passing year. This is his narrative. For centuries, individuals have vanished worldwide, but our documented records in North America span merely the last 50 years or so, particularly concerning those who venture into the wilds or mountains and never return. I'm alluding to complete disappearances, leaving not a shred of evidence behind to unravel their fate. Consequently, the actual count of the vanished remains an enigma. It might well exceed the track numbers, a chilling prospect that's more than probable. It was the year 1962, and I was merely 17 years old at the time, born and raised in Quinn, South Dakota, in close proximity to the Badlands. Ours was a life steeped in poverty, the kind that meant a perpetual absence of food in our home. Consequently, my father sent me out every weekend to scavenge for sustenance. That particular Saturday in July remains etched in my memory. It was scorching, the whole summer ablaze with a heat surpassing previous years. We lacked a fan or a swamp cooler, enduring the season drenched in sweat, relying on copious amounts of water to endure each day. My scavenging trips always involved carrying a jug of water and a few essentials for lunch, if any were available. On that day, I grabbed my water and meager provisions, setting off for the Badlands, a grueling 12-mile journey where I sought sustenance. To return before supper time, I routinely woke at 5 a.m. The journey along the dark dirt road leading into the Badlands felt unusually quiet that morning. Occasionally, kind-hearted individuals passing by would offer aid, recognizing our impoverished state, providing food or spare change for a meal. However, that morning, not a soul traversed the path. An unsettling silence draped the surroundings, as if the world had vacated. It was an eerie sensation, unparalleled then and since. In the Badlands, I scoured the terrain as was my routine, searching for wild-growing vegetation, small game, or occasionally fresh roadkill for sustenance. Most of the day elapsed fruitlessly, yielding scarce findings. However, dusk heralded a sharp turn for the worse. As I retraced my steps homeward, navigating the familiar trail while the sun dipped over the horizon, an abrupt and piercing jolt lanced through my lower back. I stumbled forward, collapsing onto my knees. Glancing down, I witnessed a long, black, glistening claw protruding from my abdomen, puncturing through my shirt. Before I could comprehend the assailant, a swift blow to my face rendered me unconscious. The next thing I remember, I was being dragged along the ground by my leg. I tried getting a look at that thing that was dragging me, but my eyes were full of blood and everything was a blur. I tried wiping the blood from my eyes, but to no avail. By this time, it had gotten dark. So even if my eyes weren't filled with blood, I doubt I could have seen a thing that was dragging me. I'm not sure how long I was dragged along the ground, but my guess was about an hour or two. As it dragged me along the ground, my mind was screaming to fight back and free myself, but my body wouldn't obey my commands. My body was limp. After what seemed like forever, I suddenly felt it get colder and noticed it had gotten significantly darker. To me, this meant we entered a cave or cavern. The thing dragged me a little further before coming to an abrupt stop and letting go of my leg. I noticed there was a small fire not too far from me. I tried moving again, but my body wouldn't obey my commands. My mind worked fine, which made me wonder if I'd been drugged with something that stopped my muscles from working. As I laid there, wondering what was going to happen next, the smell of rotting flesh hit my nose, and I started dry heaving. The left side of my body hurt like hell as I dry heaved and remembered getting stabbed in the lower back and the claw protruding from my stomach. I blacked out a few minutes later and started having the most frightening dreams I've ever had. I was sitting next to a campfire, watching myself from across the fire being hung upside down and skinned alive by some type of beast I could never have imagined. The thing was using a crudely made knife as it removed the skin from my body. I watched myself scream over and over in pain as life slipped away from my body. I noticed in my dream there were multiple other bodies around the campfire that were removed of their skins as well. I'm not sure how long I slept, but I was awoken to the sound of loud commotion. I could now move my head slightly and could see out of my blurry eyes just enough to make out two dark figures that appeared to be fighting with each other. The fight went on for several minutes when suddenly, one fell to the ground in a heap, and the other grasped its neck and started thrashing around in a violent manner like it was badly wounded. All I could think about as the tears streamed down my face was that I was next. I laid there for what seemed like an eternity before I finally started getting some movement back in my limbs. When I could finally move enough to sit up, I made sure I sat up very slowly and quietly. The fire had gone out, so it was very dark, and I wasn't sure if there were any more things around me. I decided I needed to remain still until sunrise, and hopefully, it'd light up enough wherever I was at. Sitting there, waiting for the sun to rise, were the longest hours of my life. That's when I was the most frightened, the uncertainty. When sunrise finally came, what I'd hoped for happened. It lit the cave just enough to be able to see. Unfortunately, my eyes were still somewhat blurry. As I stood up to leave, I looked around and could see the two dark figures lying on the ground, along with several other bodies. I assumed the other bodies were what was giving off the smell of rotting flesh. I tried being as quiet as I could as I stumbled out of the cave, but I knew I had to hurry as fast as I could in case there were, in fact, more things in the cave. When I made it out of the cave, I took each step carefully, as I didn't know how high I was, and I didn't want to fall off a cliff or tumble down a steep mountain. I felt my way along as best I could, being I could only make out shapes but not any detail. I walked for hours and hours, going over several mountains and crossing several rivers before finally coming to a dirt road. Once I hit the dirt road, I literally laid down in the middle of it and passed out from exhaustion. The next thing I remember was waking up in a hospital, surrounded by several nurses and two doctors, and my eyesight was clear again. They were talking to me, trying to wake me up. The first thing they asked me when I became coherent was what my name was. So I told them. They then asked me what I was doing before being found on the dirt road and how I got the massive wound in my lower back that went straight through me. They said I was very lucky, as I barely missed my kidney and stomach. I hesitated for a minute, deciding whether or not I should divulge the entire truth of what happened to me. In those seconds, I decided it was best to keep it to myself. So, I told them I was out scavenging for food and had gotten lost and found a log, and a branch from the log impelled me. What shocked me the most was when they told me where I was. I was in White Clay, which is a city in Nebraska about 50 miles from the Badlands, from where I last was. They told me I'd been found in the Nebraska National Forest, which is about 17 miles from the Badlands. After hearing that, my ears started ringing from shock, and I tuned everyone out. I couldn't believe I'd ended up so far away from where I'd started. The hospital eventually got a hold of my parents, who had to hitch a ride from a friend to come pick me up, being my parents didn't have a car at the time. Of course, the first thing they asked me was what happened. Again, I lied to them. At the time, I wasn't ready to tell anyone the truth yet. I wasn't even sure of what happened, and I wanted to get everything clear in my head before I breathed a word of it to anyone. It took a few weeks before everything went back to normal, and I decided to tell my parents the truth of what happened. I'm not even sure to this day if they believe me, but I don't really care. Over time, the story of what happened to me spread around our town. A year later, a Native American tribal leader from one of the local Lakota tribes I'd always seen around town came up to me and said he wanted to speak to me about what had happened. I agreed, so he took me to the local diner, bought me lunch, and had me tell the story. He sat there intently listening, never looking shocked or surprised, as I laid out the entire story in detail. It wasn't until the end and what he told me that scared the hell out of me. He said, "Young man, you're very lucky to be alive. What stabbed you from behind and dragged you to that cave was what we call the way to gay. It means man-eating creature. They've been around for a long time. Stories of them taking young people from our tribes and eating them have been passed down from generation to generation. As time goes on, they seem to get smarter. I don't care if no one else believes you. I do, and so do my people." He then paid for my lunch, got up, and left without saying another word. I never ventured back into the Badlands after that experience and don't think I ever will. For more scary horror stories, please subscribe.